Alright, so who is going to make it into Best Director at the 96th Academy Awards? My name is Brian Rowe, this is the awards contender, and in today's video I'm giving you my early Oscar predictions for Best Director. Here we go. So I would say Best Director this year is kind of similar to a lot of the other categories I've talked about in that I would say there's like 2 or 3 people that are very likely of getting in. Whereas like slots 4 and 5 are kind of open right now. I think we can all agree, especially those first 2 slots, like they're not changing from now until early 2024. Like they're happening in Best Director. And I feel like most of us are feeling pretty confident as to whom is going to win. Christopher Nolan is having a moment. He has been doing amazing work for decades now. So many modern classics, blockbuster films, critically adored, audiences love them. He's gotten some Oscar nominations throughout the years for Memento, Inception, Dunkirk, but he has not had his moment in the spotlight at the Oscars yet. Some people might just assume Christopher Nolan has won an Academy Award, but he hasn't. And I feel like the timing is right this year. We of course have had other amazing films in 2023 besides Oppenheimer, but really when the story is written about the year in film that is 2023, Oppenheimer is going to be one of the main titles that are talked about. I mean, it was such a behemoth at the box office last July, going into like August, September, and beyond. And by all accounts, I feel like made by any other director, it would have done fine. Maybe it would have been a hit, but nobody but Christopher Nolan could have turned that into a near billion-dollar movie. Like, that's still just mind-boggling to me how much money Oppenheimer made. And like, the Academy doesn't always reward the films that made the most money. We don't get a Titanic winning Best Director and Best Picture every year. Oftentimes they'll get behind a movie that didn't do well at the box office, but it doesn't hurt to have a terrific film that everyone loves, that made a ton of money at the box office. Like, the Academy will look at that. It will play a role sometimes. And I do think this year Oppenheimer is going to do very well. As I've talked about on the channel before, Poor Things, I believe, is going to be Oppenheimer's biggest competition when it comes to Best Picture, which I'll be talking about in an upcoming video. But in Best Director, as of this recording in November, Christopher Nolan seems to have this in the bag. I cannot imagine him losing the prize next year. As I said, the timing just feels right. He's going to be overdue. He made a very awards-friendly movie, a period film based on a true story. They like that kind of movie. Like, I don't think they were ever going to reward Christopher Nolan an Oscar for like The Dark Knight, a comic book movie. I thought he might have a chance to win stuff for Dunkirk, but that just got overshadowed by a lot of other films, like The Shape of Water. But this time it's going to be near impossible for anything to really overshadow Oppenheimer, how well it did, how much people love it. Like, the Academy is definitely nominating this movie for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Adapted Screenplay. It's probably getting 3 Oscar nominations in acting for Cillian Murphy, Robert Downey Jr., and maybe Emily Blunt. So if Oppenheimer can get 11, 12, 13 Oscar nominations, is nominated across the board, tons of top category nominations, below the line it shows up almost everywhere, like, it's going to be hard for any director to beat Christopher Nolan. I just think at this point, after all the great work he's done, Christopher Nolan is very likely winning the Oscar for Best Director, so he's definitely getting in. He's in the #1 slot. The other person I would say who's basically 100% getting into Best Director right now is Martin Scorsese. He almost never misses. Like, in the last decade, the only major theatrical film he made that did not get him a Best Director nomination was Silence. That film was very under the radar. I think it only got that 1 nomination for cinematography, but that was definitely an anomaly. They nominated Scorsese in Best Director for Hugo, The Wolf of Wall Street, and The Irishman. And Killers of the Flower Moon, his latest, has been adored by critics and audiences. I was kind of mixed on it if you watched my review of it, but I definitely appreciate the work he put into that movie. It's not just something he threw together, man. Like, that had a very specific vision, and he did a tremendous job with it. And just considering how epic it is in scope, that 3.5-hour running time, those amazing actors, like that ending that brings a certain someone onto the screen who we don't often see. Killers of the Flower Moon, I still think could get as many as 11 or more Oscar nominations. Even though it didn't set the box office on fire, it didn't necessarily need to. It did not need to pull Oppenheimer numbers to be a major player at the Oscars. And so, as of this moment, I don't know how many Oscars Killers of the Flower Moon will actually win, but I feel like at worst case, it's going to play like The Irishman and get lots of nominations across the board. Maybe it doesn't win anything, or maybe it takes like just 1 or 2 prizes, but it is definitely getting into lots of categories, and Martin Scorsese in Best Director, 100% safe. He is getting it. Number 3, I would say, is Yorgos Lanthimos for Poor Things. I mean, I can't imagine him not making it. It is such a visual feast. It is such a confident movie in every regard, from the look of the movie, to the pacing, to the performances. It's so him. Like, if you've seen The Favorite and The Lobster and The Killing of a Sacred Deer, like, his sensibilities in his smaller films have transcended into this bigger budget visual masterpiece of a film. I love Poor Things. It's definitely the film I would rank the highest of the year that is probably getting into Best Director. Yorgos Lanthimos is very much appreciated by other directors who will do the initial voting. And I mean, you can just take any 10-minute segment of Poor Things and it just knocks your socks off. I mean, it's just one of the greatest films I've seen in a long time. And a lot of the reason it works so well is Lanthimos' direction. He is firing on all cylinders in this movie, and it's the kind of direction that will not be ignored. I wouldn't say he's like 100% a lock, like I believe Christopher Nolan and Martin Scorsese are at this point, but it's like 99.9. Like, I cannot imagine them snubbing him. That would be the snub of the year. Like, I think Poor Things might get the most amount of Oscar nominations than anything, like over Oppenheimer and Killers of the Flower Moon. I tweeted out at one point, and I still think it could maybe happen. If Poor Things gets nominated basically everywhere it can get 14 Oscar nominations, which would tie the record with All About Eve, Titanic, and La La Land, another movie starring Emma Stone, which I find very funny. So yeah, Poor Things will have a lot going for it. I think Emma Stone is the frontrunner to win Best Actress. I think Best Supporting Actor Mark Ruffalo and Willem Dafoe might make it in. And then Picture, like, it could win Picture over Oppenheimer. Like the same way The Weirder, The Shape of Water won Best Picture over Dunkirk. Like, we could have something similar to that happen again, where Oppenheimer gets very close, but ultimately Poor Things wins Picture, even if Christopher Nolan wins Director. Now, could Yorgos Lanthimos beat Christopher Nolan? Like, very unlikely. I just don't know if Lanthimos is in a position yet where he could overtake Nolan. I don't see that happening, even if Poor Things were to surprise, like, win Best Picture. I still think Nolan would take Director, but in terms of getting nominated, you can bet Yorgos Lanthimos is getting in. Alright, so I would say Nolan, Scorsese, and Lanthimos. They are getting in. Slots 4 and 5 are a bit more open. I would say there's like 6 or 7 directors fighting it out for slots 4 and 5. Like, I could see a reality of any of these 7 people taking those final 2 slots. It'll kind of depend on the precursor ceremonies. There are probably a couple films that right now we're thinking, oh, that'll probably just do okay throughout award season, and then it just does like extremely well. It takes things over, and come Oscar nominations morning, it's getting into Best Director and Screenplay and maybe some categories we weren't expecting. Right now, I'm going to call someone for that 4th slot that I'm feeling better about with each passing week. I felt really good about his chances when I saw this film at Telluride, and the fact that the film is really connecting with audiences right now, it's doing well, and it's going to keep playing through December and January. And as I've said, I think the Academy is going to embrace this film. It's unlike anything else in the marketplace right now. It's kind of a feel-good throwback to 70s cinema. I adore this film, and this man has gotten into Best Director 3 times before, so they really love him. He's never won in Best Director. He, of course, would, again, have no chance to win, but I do think Alexander Payne is going to get a Best Director nomination for The Holdovers. This is a movie that is 100% getting into Best Picture. I think it has a very good chance of getting into Best Actor for Paul Giamatti. I would say Divine Joy Randolph is the frontrunner right now to win Best Supporting Actress, and I think The Holdovers is winning Best Original Screenplay. So it feels weird to me if it's going to get into all of those categories. It is a smaller film, I guess you could argue. It's quiet, it's not flashy in any way. So I guess you could argue, well, Alexander Payne did a very good job, but the Academy is going to embrace the film in other categories, not necessarily director. But like Sideways, that's not flashy. The Descendants, Nebraska, he got in for all of those, and I think The Holdovers is his best film since Sideways. I did like it more than The Descendants and Nebraska. So I'm just like that would feel weird to me for Payne to miss. I just feel right now that Payne is going to make it, so I am including him in my predictions. Now, when it comes to slot number 5, this is a bloodbath. There are so many people who could make it in. And again, Alexander Payne is not safe by any means. He could miss too, like we'll see. But slot number 5, I've gone back and forth the last few hours. Originally this morning, I had someone else in the 5th place slot, and then I thought about it, and I thought about it. I remembered back on everything I saw at Telluride, and I went, I don't know. I think if there's going to be a shocker nominee, maybe a movie that doesn't get a ton of nominations, but gets into Best Director, like I have a feeling I know what that film could be. But before I get to that choice, let's talk about some of the other contenders. Like 2 people I would love to see get in are Celine Song for Past Lives and Emerald Fennell for Saltburn. Those are my other 2 favorite films of the year, along with Poor Things. But I just think if either of those women get a nomination, it's going to be in Best Original Screenplay. And right now, I'm like, I don't know how well Saltburn is going to do just in general this award season. It might be mostly ignored. Like, I love this movie so much. Any nomination it gets anywhere, at any award show, I'm going to be celebrating. Like, I just hope it gets into the Oscars somewhere, even if it just gets into like cinematography, gets an original screenplay nomination for Fennell. Like, I just want this movie to be recognized at the Oscars in some capacity. I don't think she can make it into Best Director, even though she was recognized in the category for Promising Young Woman, her 2020 debut. I would say Celine Song has like a slightly better chance in Best Director if there's like enough passion for the movie. If Past Lives played for everybody who saw it like it played for me, this is my favorite film of 2023. Celine Song deserves more than just the original screenplay nomination. I think she deserves to take one of those 5 slots for Best Director. She would make my list, but I just think because it's her debut, I think they're going to give her the love in original screenplay and not director. Director is just too competitive. If Best Director had 10 slots, then she could probably make it. But with just 5, it's not going to happen this year. I haven't seen Origin yet, but that's supposed to be really great. And Ava DuVernay has still not gotten a Best Director Oscar nomination. I think she's fantastic. I would love to see that happen in the years to come. I've seen her name on a few lists. I don't think it's going to happen for Origin. Same thing with Sofia Coppola and Priscilla. She has a slight chance of getting into Best Adapted Screenplay. Like, if that category wasn't so crazy competitive, like if there weren't so many heavy hitters already fighting it out to get into that category. Coppola did such a fine job on Priscilla, and she has not received an Oscar nomination since Lost in Translation. It's been 20 years since she won the Oscar for Best Original Screenplay. I would love to see Sofia Coppola back with a nomination. She's hovering around 6th or 7th place in Best Adapted Screenplay. It is possible she makes it in there if there's enough love for her movie, but Best Director, no, not this year. For a hot minute, I thought Ridley Scott could maybe have a slight chance to get in for Napoleon, but the reviews that I've seen in the last couple days have been kind of divisive. I mean, more so on Twitter. Like, there's a lot of hate for this movie on Twitter. I was like, whoa, I'm still gonna see it. I love Ridley Scott, Joaquin Phoenix, Vanessa Kirby. My brother wants to check it out, so we're gonna see it over Thanksgiving weekend, and I'm hoping I like it more than some others did. At this moment, I think if Napoleon is recognized at the Oscars, it will be in technical categories. Ridley Scott, like, I would love for him to win his Oscar at some point. Like, who knows, maybe Gladiator 2. Gladiator 2, starring Paul Mescal, is coming. We shall see. And Todd Haynes, May December. I am so curious to see this film. I've been reading up on this movie for months, and I will finally get a chance to check it out here in a couple weeks. Todd Haynes did not get into Best Director for Carol, which I think is an excellent, excellent movie, and got into Best Actress and Best Supporting Actress. So I don't think he can make it in for May, December. All right, so that takes me to the final names to talk about here. I have 5. I think I said 7 before. It's 5. 5 people fighting it out for that 5th slot. I could see any one of these 5 directors getting in. None of them would surprise me. I would be like, oh, okay, they went with him, or they went with her. I might be like, oh, interesting. Like, I thought this was going to happen. They went in this direction. We will have a better sense as to how things are going once we see what gets in at like Golden Globes and Critics' Choice, who gets nominated at the DGA Awards. There's a reason I call this early Oscar predictions, because we haven't really seen a lot of actual lists of nominees anywhere yet. So we're just speculating based on what has happened in years prior, the films that I've seen, like the directors who have been recognized maybe before at other Oscar ceremonies. Any of these 5 have a significant chance of getting into Best Director. Let's start with Bradley Cooper for Maestro. This film is going to do very well at the Oscars. It might not get like the most nominations, but I could see it getting like 8 or 9 or 10 or something. I think it's pretty safely getting into Best Picture, Best Actor for Bradley Cooper, and Carey Mulligan for Best Actress. It probably gets into Original Screenplay and some tech categories. And given all the praise this movie has received since its premiere at Venice, like, Bradley Cooper could also get into Best Director. He could be that rare chameleon who gets into the Oscars in both actor and director. It happens here and there, not often. Now, he did not get a Best Director Oscar nomination for A Star is Born. They nominated him for Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Adapted Screenplay, but in Director, they looked elsewhere. And I think that's going to happen again in Best Director for Maestro. If the category wasn't as competitive, if there was only like 1 or 2 people who were probably getting in and slots 3, 4, and 5 were wide open right now, then I'd say maybe he has a chance. But because there's only wiggle room right now, I would say in 2 of the 5 slots, like, I just don't think it's going to happen. I think all of the campaign, energy, money, all of the interviews, everything he does this entire award season is going to be going after his first Oscar win for Best Actor. I mean, I haven't seen the movie yet, but based on the trailer and some clips that I've seen, like, this is a physical and emotional, transformative performance. I think Best Actor right now is between Bradley Cooper and Cillian Murphy. like depending on what direction these awards bodies goes throughout the season, like who might pick up the most steam, Bradley Cooper has been nominated for 9 Oscars in the last decade. Like, he will definitely have the overdue narrative, and because there's no way in hell he could ever win in Best Director, I feel like Cooper and everyone on his team know that the best shot at a win is going to be in Best Actor, and so that is what they're going to focus on. I don't think Bradley Cooper can make it in Best Director for Maestro. And then what about Greta Gerwig for Barbie? This, in some ways, to me, is the biggest question mark. Barbie could do much better this award season than we're expecting. Like, it might get into Best Actress for Margot Robbie. It might get into Best Supporting Actress for America Ferrera. It might get into Best Director for Greta Gerwig. They might go nuts for Barbie. Like, it could do extremely well. And we're all over here like, well, it probably gets into Best Picture, maybe Supporting Actor for Ryan Gosling, and then Screenplay, and that's it. And then we're all shocked on Oscar nominations morning when it gets into almost every top category. Like, that could happen. For me, the top category that is like the least likely for Barbie to get in is Best Director in a way, just because of the insane competition. Best Director and Best Actress too are so competitive. I'm just like, are they going to be really, really cool and nominate Greta Gerwig for Best Director? I mean, they've done it once before for her lovely work on Lady Bird. She did not get a director nomination for Little Women, even though she deserved to. And then, I mean, so much of Barbie's success, so much of why it is a great, great film is Greta Gerwig. Like, this is her vision. And I feel like if the Academy embraces the movie enough, she could get into Best Director. It would not surprise me. If Gerwig can make it into a couple of the precursors, let's say she gets nominated for Best Director at the Golden Globes and at Critics' Choice, she makes it in at DGA, in some ways she might be the smartest pick for that 5th slot. I have been going back and forth. There was a moment this morning where I was like, Brian, you might be overthinking this. Greta Gerwig might get that 5th slot. Like, she will make it. I'm just like, I can't do it yet. Like, maybe down the road. Let's see how things play out in the beginning of award season. I'm just doubting. I'm doubting that they'll nominate Gerwig. I don't think they are cool enough to do that. I mean, here's the deal. There should be one woman who gets into Best Director this year. We've had so many amazing films in 2023 directed by women. Barbie, Past Lives, Saltburn, Anatomy of a Fall, like so many great titles. It will be kind of disappointing if it's just 5 men. I'll be like, what? Natalie Portman will have something to say about it at the Golden Globes, trust me. The person I actually had in the 5th place slot this morning was Justine Triet for Anatomy of a Fall. The directors in the Academy often pick like one international filmmaker to get into Best Director. It happens all the time, almost every year. And I was like, what's the international pick this year? And I feel like Justine Triet definitely has a shot. Like, that would be a really cool nomination. She's probably getting into Best Original Screenplay, and Sandra Hüller is getting into Best Actress. I'm almost 100% on that. And I feel like the movie will probably get into Best Picture. And so that's what I was thinking for a little bit. Again, I want a woman to get into Best Director, but then I just was like, I don't know. The Academy might think of Anatomy of a Fall as more Sandra Hüller's movie than it is like a directorial vision. That might be the case with that film. I mean, Justine Triet did a phenomenal job. It is such a brilliant piece of filmmaking, but I do feel like enough Academy voters will walk out really thinking about the Sandra Hüller performance first over the direction and the screenplay and other things. So I sadly scratched her off the list, although she's very close. Another surprise nominee in Best Director could be Cord Jefferson for American Fiction. I have not seen this movie yet. I've heard amazing things. I predicted in a recent video in Best Actor that Jeffrey Wright will receive his first ever Oscar nomination for his performance in the movie. American Fiction won the People's Choice Award at Toronto, and I feel like it's getting into Best Picture. It's probably getting into Best Adapted Screenplay. And so could it also make it into Best Director? I think it could. Like, if there's enough passion for American fiction at just the right time in award season, Cord Jefferson could also make it into Best Director. It's hard given that I haven't seen the film, I've only looked at the trailer. Just in terms of the tone of the trailer, it looks a little bit more comedic than I was expecting. So I'm not going to predict Cord Jefferson right now, but he could also make it in. When I think about all of these potential nominees for Best Director, I just keep going back to Greta Gerwig for Barbie. I'm like, she might be in 4th place, Brian. She might not even be in 5th. Like, she might do very well throughout award season, and by like the end of February, I'm like, what the hell was I talking about in that November video? Of course, Greta Gerwig was getting into Best Director. That might be the case. But as of this recording, I'm gonna go with someone else for that 5th slot. Someone I have not mentioned in this whole video, and someone who I just feel very confident is going to do it. It is such a unique directorial vision. I did not love the movie as much as others, but watching this film at Telluride, I was like, this is such an unusual piece of filmmaking. It's definitely unlike anything else made this year, and I feel like the directors are going to go for it. I don't know if this movie can get into Best Picture, any of the acting categories, screenplay. This, to me, feels like the 2023 film that might not get nominated for much, but it gets into Best Director. Just based on that unique vision, I believe that final slot is going to Jonathan Glazer for The Zone of Interest. This movie, set in World War II Germany, is such a haunting vision. It's one that Jonathan Glazer spent many years developing, getting right. I think he said he started working on the movie in 2016, 2017. And here we are, the movie is finally coming out, and it is just fascinating from a directorial standpoint. I feel like Jonathan Glazer is one of those guys who's done excellent work for many years, has never been recognized by the Academy, and voters have just been looking for that right moment to get him into the club, to get him into Best Director. I feel like this is the movie that's going to do it for him. He's done tremendous work on films like Birth, Under the Skin. I guess you could argue those movies were a little bit too weird, but in The Zone of Interest, which is also kind of weird, let's be honest, he is exploring subject matter that's a little bit more like awards friendly, the kind of movie I could see Academy voters going for. I'm feeling pretty good about his chances, even if it is kind of a wild card. Jonathan Glazer might not show up anywhere this entire award season, but I've seen his name on a lot of lists, and I do think he makes sense. Other directors are going to recognize the power, the vision, and again, even if the movie doesn't do very well throughout award season, I do think that Best Director nomination could still happen. Even if Barbie and Maestro and Anatomy of a Fall and American Fiction all get into Best Picture and a bunch of the top categories, like sometimes we get a really cool shocker in director. That happens all the time. I always go back to that Cold War nomination from a few years ago. And so I feel like the directors will give us a slightly unusual choice in the category. It's not necessarily going to be 5 movies that are all getting into Best Picture and a bunch of acting categories. I think that 5th slot is going to Jonathan Glazer for The Zone of Interest. It makes sense. I could see that happening, even if he doesn't make it into all the precursors. Like, if there's going to be a shocker in Best Director that not everybody is expecting, I could see Jonathan Glazer being that person. Again, we have many weeks to go. A lot of things can happen in this category, but as of right now, I'm feeling pretty confident about these 5 choices. My early Oscar predictions in Best Director are Christopher Nolan, Oppenheimer, Martin Scorsese, Killers of the Flower Moon, Yorgos Lanthimos, Poor Things, Alexander Payne, The Holdovers, and Jonathan Glazer, The Zone of Interest. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Let me know in the comments below who you think is going to be nominated for Best Director at the 96 Academy Awards. And stay tuned in the coming days for my early Oscar predictions for Best Picture. We'll see you next time at the Awards Contender.